so excited to be joining you today with Writer's Atelier. I am going to do a few things today, which I'm gonna introduce myself. We'll talk just a couple of minutes about Grave Maidens and War Maidens, which are my two YA fantasies. And then I have some book recs for you featuring Black authors with Black characters, which I think is exceptionally timely right now. I will also will be answering some of your questions if anybody has any. And if you hear children shrieking in the background, those are my 3 sons. I I kicked them all out of the house, but whether or not that actually happens remains to be seen. Yes, how are y'all doing? It's been a tumultuous couple of weeks, hasn't it? I mean, it's been a tumultuous years, but definitely tumultuous couple of months with COVID-19 and especially all the racism that has been forefront in the news, even though that's not a new event. It's something that's gone on forever. It's just become a lot more prevalent right now. So for people of color, it has to be especially heart-wrenching right now. So all my love and support to you. Get into it. So a little bit, my name's Kelly Coon. I am a young adult author. I wrote 2 young adult fantasy books. Well, those are the 2 that are published. I've written 7 and I'm working on my 8th. 2 young adult fantasy books. One of them is called Grave Maidens, as you can see here and behind me, the giant poster my husband had made for me when my book was published. And it's about a 16-year-old healer named Kammani who wants to save the dying ruler of her city-state so that her little sister is not forced to be his death bride in the afterlife. It's kind of spooky. There's a little bit of a mystery, although that's not the central focus. And there's a little bit of romance, although that's not the central focus. It centers on a girl who wants to follow her dreams, who is prevented by society from doing so, and also by a lot of bad people. Yeah, so that's Grave Maidens. War Maidens is the sequel, which comes out in October of this year. It's now available for pre-order through Delacorte Press. And yeah, I actually have a description of that because I don't have the whole spiel memorized. So this is War Maidens. It is the action-packed conclusion, I didn't write that, to the heart-wrenching Grave Maidens fantasy duology. And spoilers, if you haven't read Grave Maidens yet, this might be a little bit spoilery. So anyway, just a few moons after escaping the tomb in Alu, Kammani and the other runaway maidens have found refuge in the city-state of Manzazu. Become a respected healer. She's brought to the brink of death. Now that the nightmares of Alu are fading, she can finally decide whether or not to take Dagan's hand in marriage. That's where the romance comes in. But when an assassin murders a healer he believes is Kammani and attempts to kill the displaced queen of Alu, the maidens realize they've been found. Hungry for revenge, Manzazu's queen wants to strike back at Alu with her fiercest weapons, her scorpion warrior maidens. But Kammani knows that war harms more than it heals. To save the innocents and any chance of a future with Dagan, Kammani must take down Alu's ruler before their lives burn up in the flames of war. So that is the conclusion to the duology, and that happens in October. I'll answer your question now. How did I prepare to write the sequel? And then I will launch into doing my little read aloud of the first chapter. Writing the sequel, I actually, when we sold the book to Delacorte Press, my agent and I had visualized it as a trilogy, as that was kind of the popular thing when I started writing this back in 2015, a million years ago, it seems like. So I had this whole progression planned out for a trilogy. And then when we sold Grave Maidens, there was a little bit of a bidding war going on. And so we decided to cut it down and sell it as a duology. And so I had to encapsulate this giant classic Greek projection of a story into just 2. And yeah, and then we sold it that way. So preparing to write the sequel, it was actually not easy. It was not easy because how I had envisioned it was not what it turned out to be. It's actually way better than I envisioned it. If I can be so not humble, braggy, not braggy. I'm just proud of it. I'm really proud of it. I think it's better than Grave Maidens, if I'm being honest. Anyway, I prepared myself by tons of research and rewriting the first half completely from scratch twice. So I don't know if that was well prepared or not, but that's what I did. Yeah, so why don't I read to you the first chapter? It's short. I say chapter, that seems really terrifying, but I'm going to read, it's like 5 pages. I'm going to read it, and at any point, if that's annoying, just tell me to quit. And thank you for saying I should be proud. I'll read, and then I will get to some more of your questions. Then again, I've got some book recs for you. And I have some other questions that people sent to me that I will answer. So this is the first chapter for Maidens. The dead could rise on this kind of night. In some ways, they already had. The cool air nipped at my shoulders as I knelt in the dirt, encircled by an elite group of warriors called the Koru, protected the queen. Torchlight reflected off their copper scorpion helmets, the scars they wore on their bodies like badges of honor. It flickered in their eyes when they looked at me, the healer who had saved them all. After more than a moon of restless illness, they'd risen from their sick beds one after another. When I'd witnessed the life in them, their muscles regaining strength as they fastened into their greaves and plaited tunics to return to their duties, I'd cried like a baby. If only my father had been alive to see it. He would have been so proud that I'd healed them, and that the queen was honoring me this night in recognition, though he would have scolded me for running myself ragged to get here. But that's what you did when you were a healer, doing everything in her power to be the best she could be, and failing. I played with the clasp of my healing satchel, flipping it up and down, fought the urge to bite my thumbnail. I had one more person to save, and her illness was nearly impossible to overcome. Miriam was the last Koru still struggling to recover, but I'd heal her too. I had to. In front of the sycamore trees, a small band of musicians repummed their drums and clacked beaded shakers. My heart banged as Saratam Tabni appeared at the edge of the circle, and the Koru parted, chanting my name in their soft, round Manzazu accent. Kammani! Kammani! Rise. The queen nodded at me, a spiked gold crown on her dark hair, earrings skimming her shoulders. Behind the queen, a towering statue of their goddess Lanaza was bathed in firelight. Her mighty wings were spread to the east and west, her scorpion's tail hovering in warning. As I stood, something white flickered in my peripheral vision near the grove. I turned, and a cold, dank breeze brushed my cheek. The sound of water slapping against a wooden boat filled my ears. It almost felt as though my feet were in the prow, the river Gardun rocking beneath. Stop it, Kammani. None of that boatman nonsense. Not now. I'd seen his skeletal face in the tomb back in Alu, and he'd been haunting me ever since we'd fled. 9 long moons of his face hovering over my palate at night, 9 long moons of his bony fingers grazing my cheek. Shoving away all thoughts of him, I stared at Dagan standing tall and proud beyond the circle of warriors and tried to calm down. He hadn't wanted me to come alone to the ceremony so late at night, so Saratam Tabni had granted him access as my escort, though no one else was allowed to attend. He smiled at me encouragingly and placed one hand over his heart. It's okay, he mouthed. Just breathe. Grateful for his encouragement, I offered him a wobbly smile of my own as the queen approached. She unclasped a necklace from around her neck, a scorpion amulet dangling from a thick leather strap. She held it up. Its sapphire eyes glittered in the firelight, and I took a deep breath to calm my fluttering heart. For what she was about to fasten around my neck wasn't just a gift. It was a promise. She was saying the Koru owed me a favor, and I could call upon them to answer it at any time, even with their lives if necessary. Kammani, healer from Alu, this evening we grant you our highest honor. She held the necklace up in front of the Koru. They leaned in to see it, some reaching out to touch the dazzling pendant. We grant you the symbol of Lanaza, our goddess of love and war. She glanced at one of the Koru standing nearby. Commander Umi, your assistance. Umi, black hair cut bluntly at her jaw, stepped forward and held my ratty curls so the queen could fasten the strap around my throat. The scorpion was cold, heavy, as it settled between my collarbones. My fingers slid across the slick metal. Saratam Tabni stepped back and met my eyes. Hers were hooded, calculating. Mighty Azu, healer, we grant you our thankfulness on this evening for all you have done for our city. You, a stranger in our land, worked to bring my warriors back to health. May the Koru repay your kindness with their allegiance. At once, the warriors brandished their battle axes and swords and shouted my name, a great wave of exultation that resonated off the homes scattered nearby. As they chanted, I locked my hands together to keep from playing with my healer satchel. I had only been doing my job, what I had been trained to do by my album. Though healing all of them had been a challenge since Moody, the healer whom I'd been working with, tended to favor the spirit world to her own rational thought. She told me that my visions from the boatman were gifts, that I should listen to what he was trying to tell me. But all he brought to me were nightmares about Alu, a city I'd never be able to visit again. Do you accept the gift that we've given you, healer? Sir Radam Tabni asked. Yes, my lady. Not accepting this gift wasn't an option. Arwia, our exiled queen of Alu, had told me so earlier. Rejecting their kindness could only lead to ill will, even if it felt like too much. I accept it. She smiled briefly. Good. We ask that you use it wisely, letting the goddess guide your heart. The queen turned to the Koru and raised her arms up high. My Koru, warrior maidens of Manzazu, children of Linaza, I invite you to feast in the Azu's honor tonight. Drink from Linaza's cup, dine from her abundance. Let us celebrate Kammani's bestowal of gifts upon our great city. We can rest easy this night, knowing we lie in her capable hands. The Koro cheered once more, a great ferocious roar, and my heart seized as I looked at them all. These warriors were part of a larger Manzazu army that protected me. The citizens of this city, our place of refuge, were now my citizens. Their illnesses mine to heal. And though the thought filled me with pride, with a certain amount of unspeakable joy, it also filled me with an overwhelming sense of responsibility. I couldn't let them down now. Though I'd barely begun to make headway in this city that would rather pray and whisper incantations than take the tinctures I gave them, I would build a successful, thriving healing practice here with my own 2 hands. I swore it. The musicians took up their drums and shakers once more to play a quick staccato rhythm. Some of the Koro gathered to dance, some dispersed to partake in the food brought in from Linaza's altars. Others hoisted me to their shoulders to sway in front of their goddess, voices raised in excitement. Azu, this is your night. Commander Umi's face was bright with religious fervor underneath me. Enjoy it. She and other warriors jostled me around to the rhythm of the drums. Writhing in embarrassment, I met Dagan's eyes at the perimeter of the courtyard. He grinned and gave a little wave. As the warriors whirled, singing a rousing hymn about honor and war and love, I looked up into Linaza's formidable face. Sightless, she stared down at me, as empty and inanimate as the gnarled trees behind her. But right when I pulled my gaze away from her sandstone eyes, the tips of her wings fluttered. Just once. And though it didn't make any sense at all, I swore my new scorpion pendant twitched against my throat in response. That's it. That's the end of chapter 1. So yeah, that's the beginning of War Maidens. I had an absolute ecstatic time writing these fierce scorpion warrior maidens, and I'm so excited how they came out. So I can't wait for y'all to read it. So I'm going to go ahead and answer some of the questions that you all have provided for me. Thank you for listening to me reading. And then I'm going to do some book recs and move on. Okay, so Erica would like to know, how did I have to modify the story arc to fit well? Okay, there's my computer acting funny. How did I have to modify the story arc to fit well in 2 books versus the 3? Okay, great question. So with 3 books, when you have a trilogy, you often follow a classic Greek projection. So you build them up in the first book, you tear them way down in the second book until they're in the depths of despair, and then you let them rise from the ashes in book 3. So I had to figure out how to condense that kind of overall character arc into 2. So what I ended up doing was mini arcs. I did a whole Greek character arc in both 1 and both 2. And then I did an overarching arc so that right at the beginning of book 2, you're going to see Kammani torn down. So it's almost the middle of the series in the beginning of War Maidens. If that makes any sense, you have to let me know. Okay, I am scrolling. Thank you for the love with the reading. Oh, thank you. I love reading my own book. Emily says she loves hearing me read my own book. Thank you. I like reading it a little. It is a little nerve-wracking to read aloud. Where do I get my ideas from? That's a great question. I've written, like I said, I've written 8 stories, and they have completely ranged in ideas. First book I ever wrote that was not, it was not published, was a Helena of Troy retelling, and I put it in a contemporary high school, and it was terrible because I didn't really follow the Helen of Troy story. I just kind of went off on my own, and it ended up being this convoluted mess of the Iliad and the Odyssey, which doesn't make sense if you know anything about the Helen of Troy story. And yeah, I just started throwing random Greek mythology into it, and it was a hot mess express. Needless to say, that did not get published. I also wrote various versions of Grave Maidens with completely different plots. And obviously Grave Maidens is the one that stuck. And then I have written a sci-fi called Nightscape that has not been published yet. We are holding off on sending that out on submission until the sci-fi market kind of gets a little bit boosty. My editor is looking at a YA contemporary right now for me, and that idea came from my own personal background. So an idea that's been percolating in my head forever related to my own life. That's where that one came from. The sci-fi idea came from me getting kicked out of a fundamentalist Baptist college when I was a freshman. That's a very long story. And I'm kind of proud of it. And I took revenge on the person who kicked me out, or got me kicked out. And I'm working on a YA thriller right now. And that idea came from, I used to be a high school English teacher, and I gave a poetry project to my students where I asked them to submit their secrets to me on little 3x5 index cards and disguise their writing and don't put their name on it. And then I tacked them all up on a bulletin board, and we could read all the secrets, not knowing who they were from or whose secret it was. And we could write poetry based on one of the secrets. It didn't have to be your own. And it was awesome. The kids did such a good job writing their poetry, and it was really lots of different places. Okay, let me have a drink. Okay, so what kind of research do I do, and how long do I spend researching before starting a book? Really depends. The contemporary with speculative elements that I have out right now with my editor, I actually went and did a little visit to a particular place that is pivotal to my story, which I can't tell you about, but I will one day if it gets published. And then since it was set in a contemporary setting, there was a lot less that I needed to research than writing something like sci-fi, where you're building a world from scratch, or fantasy, where you're building a world from scratch. In those cases, the research is tons. And I research before to kind of build my fantasy world or my sci-fi world, and I research as I'm going. So, I mean, even silly stuff, like I'm in Grave Maidens, like how something was baked, for example. They eat these rounds of bread, and I'm like, wait a minute, how would they bake this? If, and so I had to go research clay brick ovens and how they were baked and what would go into them, just so I could write a line about, to make sure that it sounds authentic to my story. So that kind of storytelling requires a ton of research, months, years. Okay. Yes, world building is very intimidating. I do have a process that I wrote. If you're interested, if you like to read or write YA fantasy or sci-fi, if you go to Underlined, and after this I will post the link for you. If you go to Get Underlined, I wrote How to Build a Fantasy World in 4 Easy Steps, and it talks about culture and how to even begin building a fantasy world. And I have a process that I kind of break down and build my fantasy worlds that way, and it's super helpful. So I'll link to that later. Would I ever do a novella for this duology? I would really love to do that. If there's a demand for that, like if War Maidens happens to do really well, and there was a demand for it, I would absolutely do it. But I think I would really like to do it from the character's perspective of Iltani. That was one of the questions I had from a reader on Instagram was, who was my favorite character to write? And obviously Kammani is one of my favorites, but she's not outside of her determination, she's not really that much like me. She's so compassionate. And I'm a compassionate person too, but she's like Hufflepuff compassionate, and I don't know that I have that in me. But Iltani, I really related to her, especially when I was in my late teens, early 20s, when I just had a wild hair. Iltani will open her mouth and say whatever she wants to say and do whatever she wants to do. She's reckless and she adds fun and a lot of life to any party. And she was really one of my favorite characters to write. So if I could write a novella centered on Iltani's experience, I would love to do that. We'll see. See if there's any kind of demand. Oh, thank you for posting that. The link has been posted for how to write a fantasy world. Emily has a demand. Thank you. Okay, I got another question, which was, where was it? Oh, what am I reading right now? That I'm one of those very weird readers in that I'm usually reading multiple books at the same time. I've got like my kitchen book that I read when I'm eating lunch. I put my little headphones on. These are my lifesaver. I have a condition, and I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called misophonia, and repetitive noises like chewing or clicking, if someone's clicking their pen, or repetitive movements, someone like shaking their foot in my peripheral vision, or someone just making a repetitive, even taking a drink or something like this too often messes with me in some strange way, and it really gets under my skin. So while I eat lunch, if my kids are in the room or my husband's in the room, I wear these to block out noise. But I wear these, and I also usually read a book. So I have a kitchen book that I read during lunch. I also usually have an Audible book going that I listen to while I am working out. I especially during COVID-19 and this quarantine, while I've been working from home and educating my children, as a lot of us have been doing, I have been making sure I get up. I get up at 6 and I go for a walk, or I do yoga, or I work out with the Peloton app, which I highly recommend. And it's my saving grace. And I listen to a book on Audible usually while I am doing that. So the books that I'm reading right now, my lunchtime book is One of Us is Next, because I am writing by Karen McManus. Because I am writing a YA thriller, I have been going just absolutely crazy and reading as many YA thrillers as I can, just to kind of get a feel for what's out there. So I've read A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Obviously I've read One of Us is Lying before. I'm reading One of Us is Next. I've read like 4 other ones, and I can't remember their names because they're all about, All Your Twisted Secrets, The Unbecoming of Mara Dyer, although that's kind of mystery thriller and kind of speculative, and like 4 others, and I can't recall their names. I'm reading that, and then I just finished Warcross, and I am now listening to Wild Card by Marie Lu, and that's my Audible listening book. And then I just started my bedroom book, Overstory, which is a Pulitzer Prize winning book, and oh my God, the author's name just left my brain. Anyway, just started that one. Just look up Overstory. It's very popular right now, and it won a Pulitzer. So blah, blah, blah. Yes, okay. So Writer's Atelier. Okay, was there a scene or part of the book that I loved and had to cut? In War Maidens, yes. So originally in War Maidens, well, I cut so much from Grave Maidens. Let me start there. Grave Maidens, originally, when we sold Grave Maidens to Delacorte Press, my editor, who is Kelsey Horton, there was another POV in my book, and it was from the boatman's perspective. So you had a first-person POV from the boatman who was on the other side, on the netherworld, commenting and moving through the city and doing his thing. So that was something that I had to pull, and it took me 4 edits through the book to actually be willing to pull him, because my editor really wanted me to take him out. She said he wasn't adding a lot to the plot. I thought he was adding a lot to the just the mood of the story, and he was giving some clues to kind of help the reader. And so I had to rework some of the stuff that he talked about into Kammani's point of view, and that was really difficult for me to have to take his POV. So as part of my pre-order promotion for Grave Maidens, I just sent out one of the scenes that I'd written from the boatman, and that made me feel at least a little bit better since I pulled him. But yeah, that was hard. From War Maidens, I pulled so much because, like I said, I rewrote the first half twice, which was super difficult because, you know, you fall in love with some of the things that you have and then you got to get rid of them. But it really did make this story so much better. And I may have cried a little bit cutting it, but it really, what I ended up with, I'm so proud of. There's just no part of it that I'm not proud of. So I'm grateful. Let's see what else we have. Yes, Warcross is amazing, Emily. It's lush. If none of you have read Warcross by Marie Lu or Wildcard, it is a near future sci-fi set in first in New York, and then the whole story moves to Tokyo. And it follows Amika Chen, who is a hacker and a gamer. And as she kind of dives into the underground world of just terrible things that happen, and gets into this Warcross Championship, which is a virtual reality gaming, and really just kind of kicks ass and takes name, and gets hired by the Warcross creator, Hideo Tanaka, to solve a problem that he has and find this guy called Zero. Anyway, it is brilliant, lush. You want to talk about world building? That is just study it for the world building, because I don't even play games. I used to when I was a kid. My sons all play games, but I'm not interested. I don't have time. And I was so into imagine how difficult that is. I'm listening to this story, and I felt like I had on virtual reality contacts, is what they wear in the story. And I felt like I was moving through these virtual worlds. So how she managed to do that was incredible. So read that. It's incredible. And Wildcard is, I didn't know that it was going to be better, but I really do think it's almost better, if that's possible. Yeah. So, some of you, I decided that I wanted to give you all, I'm sure you all know this. The few of you who are here listening, I'm sure you know, but I just went on a rampage, and I already, with my sons, have tried to give them authors of color to read with characters of color as protagonists, to kind of make sure that I am building empathy by introducing characters to my 3 white sons who don't look like them, so that they can start relating and put themselves in the shoes of people that they might not have anything to do with. So some of my book recs that I've loved. Dear Martin by Nick Stone. I don't know if y'all have read that one, but incredible. I'm having my sons are going to be doing a POC readathon this summer. They all love to read, all 3 of them, and I'm going to help them in their journey with some very focused books that are outside their reading list from school. Dear Martin by Nick Stone. Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky by Kwame Mabalia. That's for my middle grade son, who's 10. And I'm Not Dying With You Tonight by Geely Segal and Kimberly Jones, talking about the riots and stuff that are, it could not be more relevant. With the riots happening right now, with the racial tension that is just boiling over, this story is a really good way, if you have kids, to talk to your kids or talk to your nieces and nephews, and get a perspective from one of the authors. Kimberly Jones is Black, and one of the authors, Geely Segal, is white. And so having both of those perspectives and POVs in a story, talking as they're going through this one night during a riot, is really incredible. For my little guy, who is 6.5, and he just finished kindergarten, I'm so proud of him. It was so tough this year, finishing up kindergarten with my little dude, but he made it, and I'm really proud of him. A couple months ago, I got him Hair Love by Matthew Cherry, and it was really beautiful. As I'm reading him the story, it was just another perspective that my little white boy is never really going to see outside of being on the pages. So that's why fiction is so important, to present those stories that otherwise they may not hear. So it's about a little girl and her dad learning how to fix her hair. And my boys see me do my hair, and that's about it. So it was really important for me to get them those stories. So yeah, that is it. Any other questions from y'all? I'll answer a couple more, and yeah, then I will get going. Okay. Yes. Love Dear Martin and Nick Stone. Yes. Fantastic. Ready Player One is another virtual reality book that's amazing too. It is. I've read that one. And yeah, how do I balance writing with my full-time editing job and being a mom of 3? Just like any other parent, I guess. You just freaking make it work. Typically, I have almost full-time writing hours, or full-time hours, while my kids are in school. Obviously, right now, that has been an issue since they're not in school, and I can't send them to summer camp this summer. So what we've been doing, my husband and I have worked out a schedule. So he gets up around 4:35. He works until about, when the kids start trickling out, around 6:30 or so. And then he takes care of them, because I get up at 6 and I kind of do my thing. I work out, get ready for the day from 6 to 8. That's my time. At 8 o'clock, I take over for the kids, and I have them from 8 to 1. So that's when I was teaching them school. I have my master's degree in education, so I was the right person for that job. So I taught them school from 8 to 1. Then at 1, he emerged from his office, and he took over them from 1 to 6. So yeah, and then we both would do work later on. So have I been as productive as I usually am? Absolutely not. My writing, usually I can whip in like 45 days. I can draft an 80,000 word book really quickly. So that's not happening right now. And I've just been having to have a lot of grace with myself and tell myself it's okay that I'm not as productive as I usually am, because hello, we're in the middle of a pandemic and I can't do everything all at the same time. So I'm making very slow progress on my thriller and doing my best to make sure that my type A Capricorn heart does not beat myself up for it. But in general, it works out really well with everything else. My full-time writing job, I can squeeze, like I said, I'm very efficient, so I can squeeze my writing job down into half the time that it might take in general. I don't take a lot of breaks. Okay, writing fuel of choice, coffee or tea, neither. Favorite writing snack? All the snacks. I feel like in quarantine, all I have been doing is snacking. That's just kind of how it's been going. And again, I am having grace with myself, because that is a little bit of a stress relief for me, is having a snack. So whatever, it is what it is. Things that I snack on when I am writing. Usually I might get a couple of dark chocolates, because those are my favorite. But when I'm writing, I'm usually like zeroed in, and I don't snack while I write. I am a Diet Coke addict, also Diet Dr. Pepper. So I do drink that a lot. In the morning, I usually go from water to coffee, to water, to Diet Coke, to Diet Coke, to Diet Coke, to water, and then wine. So I have a healthy mix of what I'm usually drinking. And while I'm drafting, sometimes I drink a glass of wine, because it helps me let go a little bit. And at night, I usually don't drink wine in the day, but at night it helps me let go a little bit while I'm drafting. But while I'm editing, clear and focused. I need caffeine and water. That's me. Yeah. So that's it. So Yes, dark chocolate is healthy. Thank you, Jessica. Good for blood pressure. Maybe not in the quantities that I've been eating it, but a little bit for sure. Okay, couple more questions. So, what are my suggestions for getting out of writer's block? That's a tough one. You know what? Before this quarantine, I had honestly felt like I have never felt that, which I know that makes me really unusual and blessed. But during quarantine, I absolutely felt it. I my brain was so occupied with worry for my children and my family and our country that I did not have space to think about anything else. Every time it was like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. My creative self was way up here, and I was very much focused on safety. So I could not even get myself to a creative mindset. So the one thing that I did in that case is recognize that we were in an unusual circumstance where I felt like my life might actually be at risk, and not force it. And then recognize that once I felt safe and once things calmed down, that if I gave myself grace during those really terrible moments, that when things calmed down a little bit, I would be able to write. So that's what I did. I just gave myself grace. I was like, look, I'm sitting here. I can't force it right now. For whatever reason, my brain isn't allowing myself to go there. And I didn't. And now I'm excited about my project. And when I sit down to write, I'm just banging out the words when I give myself permission to write. So that part's been really good. In general, if you have writer's block, and it has nothing to do with like pandemic or extreme racism directed at you, in those moments, I will say give yourself grace, because there's, maybe bigger problems to worry about. But in general moments, I'm a very big fan of discipline, sitting your butt in a chair and forcing yourself to write anything, even a letter to yourself, or write something that you look forward to writing. Sometimes you're in the middle of a scene and you're like, this is kind of a transitional scene. It needs to be there. And it's really a lot of world building, but I'm not really sure about the world building yet. Skip it. No one said you have to write your book in order. Go to a scene you're really excited about. Like if there's an action scene, oh God, I love writing action scenes. Go write the action scene. Or if you don't know how an entire scene is going to, how it's going to look or where it's even going to take place, just write the dialogue. Or if you don't know what the dialogue is going to look like, just write some setting notes. So sometimes even just do research. That's writing too, because our books cannot get written without doing some research. Or another tip is drawing. So I draw my physical maps of all my worlds, even with my contemporary. I drew a little bit of her street and where she would drive and things like that. It just helps me. I wouldn't consider myself an artist, but for whatever reason, that really helps me. I like spatial things. Helps get my brain in order. So yeah. Blah, blah, blah. When I write, I get a lot of self-doubt. So it kind of strengthens the wall in my head when I try to even get words on a page. Yeah, I feel that. So maybe do something in that case, Emily. If you're writing and you have a lot of self-doubt, maybe do something to strengthen yourself mentally. Do something that you know that you're really good at to get yourself back in a good mental place. If you're having trouble and doubting yourself, do something at which you are extremely capable, even if it has nothing to do with writing. And then the next time you sit down to write, it might be a matter of, boosting your self-confidence. That really helps. Also, I used to doubt myself a lot and still do, because that never really goes away. And I strengthen that with writing books, researching. I have, I don't know if you can see behind me, a whole list of books on this shelf. The Emotional Craft of Fiction by Donald Moss, Story Genius, Writing a Killer Thriller, John Truby, The Anatomy of Story. Read about storytelling, and that might give you a tool that you can use to sit down and start writing. After I wrote 3 failed novels that did not get published, even though I tried, I decided to go and start over from the beginning. Even though I have my undergrad in creative writing, I clearly was not an excellent novelist. So I went back to like from the beginning and I just started researching on how to write a novel. And then when I did sit down to write Grave Maidens, I had all this knowledge behind me and I was much more confident as I went because I had gained a lot of craft. Okay, do I have any favorite authors or any that I study that may have positive influences on your own work? Honestly, I am impressed by so many authors. Everyone asks me my like favorite books and authors. I have a hard time picking one. I'm like that with a lot of things though. Like there's so many great things. There's so many great books and authors. One that I consistently have loved since I was young and I think opened my eyes to worlds that I did not understand, especially growing up in a very, very strict fundamentalist environment, a very white fundamentalist environment, was Toni Morrison. And I read Beloved when I was in college, and that knocked me completely on my ass. And it just opened my eyes, really. I felt like that was a pivotal moment for me, was reading that, because I was like, whoa, okay, I did not understand. And I still don't understand, but at least it kind of opened a door for me to begin to walk through. So I love Toni Morrison for that. In the YA realm, I'm a big fan of Sabata here. Her storytelling just gets me. As I read her Ember in the Ashes series, I literally ignored my children to kind of push through that. So like neglectfully ignored my children. Like, get yourself a drink. I'm reading. I love her storytelling. And Bridget Kemmerer, who she writes in a simpler way than Sabata here does. And so like even my 12-year-old son, he has a high reading level anyway. So, but any other 12-year-old can read it and completely understand what's going on in this very complex fantasy world. And it's perfect. Her pacing is really good. And I love it. I love her as a style. I also, for thrillers, Sarbani Banerjee is a new author. She just published Hide With Me that came out in 2018. She's an Indian American author, and she writes in two POVs, male and a female, and it is kick-ass and poetic. So you don't usually expect to find a lot of poetic language that's very literary in feel in a thriller, and this has it. Yeah. So what else? What else? Yes, for Ember in the Ashes. We all love it. Oh, Emily's almost done with A Heart So Fierce and Broken. Yes. And I am dying for the third in her trilogy. She's finishing it up. She was supposed to have it finished the end of March, but quarantine and pandemic. And so she's finishing up. What else? Other authors that I love? I mean, again, I have a million favorite authors. It's really bad. I can't choose. I have a hard time narrowing things down. Anyway, so maybe take one last question and then we can go on with our afternoons if anybody has anything else to ask, and then we will move on. Let me see if I mentioned everything I was supposed to here. Yeah. Nope, did that. I'm good. Okay, so if no one has anything else, then I will bid you adieu